How is the audio, everyone? So, I haven't used this microphone very much before. We're just going to see how it goes. It's very sensitive. I didn't want to do this, but I might have to take the little cap off. Testing, testing. Okay, good. It seems to be fine. Every time I get out this book, I look at this Growlithe and I observe just the fluffiness. It looks like it looks like it has pom-poms attached to it, which it kind of does. You brush out a lot of yarn, but it's very funny to me to imagine a Growlithe looking like this in the modern day. Okay, so as far as I remember, we have done two of the legs, one foreleg and one hind leg, which means we need to make one of each today. Let's see, is that six? I think so. Two single crochet in each single crochet. Recently, I was watching Premiere too, and I thought it was really cool how he had that whole stream that was him like trying to figure out pixel art. He and a professional pixel artist, they would each think about sprites from older games like the Nintendo and Super Nintendo Entertainment Systems, and then try to draw them from memory. And Pete's, I could usually recognize, which is pretty cool. But like that says something about how well they're designed or how recognizable they are. But it was really interesting to see them compared to like the official spray art because it's not something I had thought too much in detail about, but even with very few colors and really blocky shapes, we got a lot of very recognizable designs like Goombas. It's really interesting to think about how the limitations of the medium help shape what it looked like. And he discussed that in another stream too. I think it was the one where he plays like the best-selling game from each Christmas over a bunch of years. And he was talking about how he thinks in the Nintendo 64 era, general kind of like older era of gaming, um, that fostered a lot of innovation because there was more limitations at the time. And that's not to say having better technology is automatically bad. He's just thinking about how limits are what inspire creativity. Like because the hardware wasn't as good, people had to come up with creative ways to get around it. Because we didn't know as much about the technology of gaming at the time, people had to come up with ways to go like not just what story do I want to tell or what game do I want to play, like what is even possible for me to do with this technology? So they tried out a bunch of different things. And that was really interesting to me. It wasn't something I'd ever thought about before. Like maybe it's easier to just like stick with your first idea when you know you can play it out. It reminds me of some art advice I heard once that was always challenge your first idea. If you keep doing that, you'll learn like, does this work well or do I need to change it? Can I make it stronger? Does it work with these other ideas I have? By the way, I'll probably put it in a comment or in the description. Recently, I had some writing published and I would love for you guys to read it. I wonder if hardware is limiting gaming today, how is it doing that? Is it in like less strong ways? Like I've heard people say that the Switch couldn't really do super realistic graphics, but I don't know enough about the technology of gaming to confirm that for myself, and it's something I want to learn more about. Like, if the Switch isn't strong enough to handle realistic graphics, if that's true, does that mean the next system will be? Or if we're looking at simpler, more deliberately less detailed graphics like in Breath of the Wild or Super Mario Wonder, which are also valid, just in case anyone wants to dispute that. Like, is that an intentional artistic choice? Like, are they saying, let's intentionally go with this art style because we want to? Because that definitely seems to be the case with Super Mario Wonder. But what about with games like Breath of the Wild? It clearly resembles say, Minecraft in how it plays, and Minecraft definitely has a very deliberately not realistic style. So I wonder if Breath of the Wild was going for something kind of like that, like it's not trying to look too close to real life. Back in the day, I heard some people comparing it to FromSoft, but I have not played a FromSoft game, so I can't say for sure if that holds any water. They certainly look very different. Wasn't Breath of the Wild's development period not all that long in the grand scheme of things? I wonder if Zelda fans are just used to getting new games pretty regularly, but however long it took, it paid off, as you can see. All right, time for some repeats. Once I asked a friend, "Hey friend, why do you want to play Breath of the Wild 2?" Because at the time we didn't know what it was going to be called. And he said very honestly, Zelda with short hair. At the time, because we didn't know that much about it, I was like, me too, buddy. I'm very curious about what the reason was to design Ganondorf so that he would appeal to both men and women. I think I've mentioned this before, but just in case I haven't, like, what's the reason for that? Like, he's evil. We all know this. We've all played these games. So is this like animals where they like make themselves look pretty and then they trick you? How come his true form is a dark dragon? Was he ever truly a Gerudo or is he some kind of spirit? Is this form a reincarnation of Demise? Who knows? People have probably written fanfics about that though. You think he ever gets tired? You think he's ever like, you know what? Maybe my ambition is just taking up so much time, you know? Maybe I should get a hobby. That's what I would do. You know, if you keep trying one thing and it's not working, you know, eventually you would go, huh, maybe I should stop doing this thing. Maybe that's why they get amnesia. I'm really curious, like, what's the next Zelda game going to be like? Because I'm not counting Tears of the Kingdom because that's a sequel. Like, what's the next full game going to be like? Clearly, there's a lot of things about Breath of the Wild that did really well, and a lot of things that call back to the first game. But I wouldn't want it to be just like Breath of the Wild, you know? It's fun to try new things. You can see how getting to explore an open world is really fun, but I'd hope for like a different kind of story, you know? For some reason, I think about like exploring caves and cliffs. Not well. I guess Breath of the Wild is kind of like Minecraft already. Not exactly like in Minecraft, just being able to like go underground and explore like mining like with gems and stuff. That could be fun. I wonder if the next game will still have an open world but focus more on story, since the story wasn't really the focus of Breath of the Wild, but it's still something that a lot of fans care about. And I wonder if that's where the idea of the memories came from. You get to experience a story, but you don't have to do it in a specific order. You figure it out a little bit at a time. It reminds me of puzzle pieces. I wouldn't want to do the exact same thing as memories in another game, but I wonder if you could have a similar idea, like when you get to a new place. Maybe it could be kind of like the active lore in Final Fantasy 16, where once you get somewhere, you can like look it up. Maybe once you get to a new place, you could be shown some of the things that have happened there, and as you explore it, it'll be like, uh, here's the thing that happened here, or you'll be like talking to someone, and that'll trigger a story event. I wonder I wonder if it would go kind of like tabletop RPG where talking to different characters makes the story go in completely different directions. Kind of like Elden Ring. Even if we weren't sailing on the sea the whole time, it could be fun to go to the beach more too. Like a Zelda game that mainly takes place on the coast. Like lots of people in real life live on coasts because they're close to water so they can travel. It's like cool. There's lots of food. Recently, I was learning about how beaches work and how they kind of move with erosion, and maybe that could even be a mechanic. It had to be sped up. In real life, that takes a really long time. But basically, in real life, the beach is made up of a bunch of barrier islands, and as the waves keep battering them, eventually they wash sand off of one side of an island and they deposit it on the other side. So maybe you could have that change how you can travel around the game. Like during this part of the game, this part is flooded, but later there's sand here, you can walk there, and there's like a chest. There are also ways that humans interact with the beaches, and long story short, we don't have a lot of awesome solutions because beaches just move. That's the thing that they do. So if humans try to do something like stop erosion from happening entirely, like it's not really possible. But we can do things like move with the beaches. It's just harder to do that if you have like a concrete foundation and indoor plumbing and stuff. Or some temporary solutions there are things like jetties, where they put the stuff in the water and they pile up the sand on one side of it and the other side of the jetty gets no sand. So that erodes a lot. If you did something like that, that could be a fun way to kind of decide like what parts of the game you can travel to and which parts you can't. Maybe you could have like a limited amount of things you can build and you have to use them sparingly. Maybe it would help if I showed you. Like, imagine if you build, like, you have like an inlet here going in to the land, and you build something here. You build a structure. Now, sand is going to wash down, and it's going to get all caught up here, and it's going to get stuck there. And this side here, is going to not get more sand, so that's going to erode. Maybe you could even put things in the water, and then you can see like more of them if you let that side erode. I don't remember if there's like surfing in the Wind Waker quote unquote trilogy, but considering that some bodies of water are really windy, usually the really big oceans, they've got big waves, that could be fun to do too. When you go under the wave, that the part of it that's not moving is the wave base. I don't think there's a lot of swimming in Wind Waker because it's mostly like it's sailing, obviously. But if you included a lot of swimming, you could like swim down to below the waves are, and there could be like that could be like where the Zora live, or there could be hidden treasure. Maybe you could have like a joke about the Rito and birds too, because usually if you're like if you're on the sea and you see birds, you go, "Oh, that must mean there's land somewhere." I don't know exactly how true that is in real life, but you know, birds tend to live on land. Some of them just fly for a really, really long time. Second floor, like done. So maybe you could be like, "Oh, if you're ever lost at sea, just follow a Rito." And like occasionally they'll fly across the sky. Something to keep in mind with real life and beaches too. You know how in Breath of the Wild there's that thing where you can do like real estate. If you are building on a coast, there is so much to keep in mind. Obviously, you want to build above sea level, you know, so you're not just constantly being flooded. But another thing to keep in mind is that the ocean, if you've ever been to a beach or even just like playing with like toy sand and you see how the water like washes away sand. It does that on big scale beaches too. So if you have like a hill of sand here, even if you're up here, and can you see that? Even if you're up here and you're like above sea level, ocean's gonna come up like this. It's gonna keep washing away the sand, carving it away. If you were carving clay with one of those implements sculptors used, and eventually it's gonna wash away enough sand that it ends up more like here. So that's why it's important to not just be above sea level. If you become like a real estate tycoon in a hypothetical Zelda game, and you don't keep in mind not just the sea level, but the equilibrium, which is what the water's doing. It's forming an equilibrium with the sand, you know, there goes your investments. I've seen a lot of people discuss how it can be difficult to balance the story and gameplay parts of a game. And Obviously, the action is really fun for a lot of people, but I wonder if you could have just like the quote unquote domestic stuff be part of the story. For example, in a lot of Zelda games, there's monsters, they're attacking, they're destroying people's homes. So maybe you could help like rebuild homes, or maybe things get lost because they're drawn under the ocean and you can help go like find them again. And then depending on who you help, maybe you can open up like different storylines, or you'll have different people help you. Kind of like in Breath of the Wild, you can have like different power-ups based on the former champions, but it could be fun to have other people actually go into battle with you or help you through dungeons. And not even like necessarily dungeons in the traditional sense, but even if you wanted to like go explore another part of the map, like climb a mountain or something, maybe there's people who know how to do that, and you helping them makes them want to help you. Or say if you wanted to go cave diving, don't just do that willy-nilly. Maybe there's people who have like a suit of armor that protects you in caves. You could have people all like work together or help each other. Maybe you could use that to show how like the ocean is a really dangerous. It's this force that humans have a really hard time with. Like it's very dangerous. And you could have whatever demon king is taking over the land be represented by the ocean. Like if you could live with the ocean, we can probably defeat a demon king. I understand that the story of Zelda is an afterthought compared to the gameplay part. I'm kind of curious about how people come up with the story in the first place. Like it's easy to fall back on an old formula, but it also gets boring. Like what made them go trains? Obviously, there's a lot of trains in Japan, but like who was looking at a train and was like, what if we made this like the focus of the game? Or why sailing? I like how different it is. I think it's fun. I just want to know what the inspiration was. Or how in Skyward Sword you spend a lot of time in the sky. It's really fun. Like, I wonder if someone was looking at like the clouds and they were doing that thing that people do even as kids, where they're like, man, what would it be like to stand on a cloud? Because as a kid, you don't know that they're made of water. They certainly look solid. What would it be like to be able to fly? What would it be like to be able to swim magically? What would it be like to be a mermaid? What if you did like the opposite of Skyward Sword, where you start out like underwater and then you find out there's the whole surface world above you? It could be kind of like an Ocarina of Time where you start out in the forest and it's very safe, it's very secluded, but sometimes you have to strike out. I think that might be why you start with a young Link. It's kind of like when kids get older, they have to go and do stuff on their own. But what if you grew up in like this tiny beach town and you're like, but what's under the water? What's above us? Some whole settlements are built on cliffs. What if you've grown up your whole life on like this kind of like wall and you're like, but what's behind us? What's in front of us? What's below us? Maybe you could even use the rocks to learn about the past of the world. In real life, you can learn about things like by examining a rock, you can learn about the environment that it was formed in. And we don't have to go that scientific, but maybe you could do something with rocks, like how water has memory. And if you gain like the ability to read the memories of the stones, you can learn about like the great conflicts that occurred in the past. You can learn about what happened with the previous heroes of the land. If my voice sounds very nasally, don't worry about it. I just have allergies. I kind of hope we get another red-haired Zelda soon. I think it looks cool. Breath of the Wild Zelda's is like strawberry blonde, but in some renders it just looks completely blonde. What was that like from the era from like Skyward Sword to Breath of the Wild? I remember my experience of it, but what was that like for the rest of the fandom? I didn't feel like it was that long, but it kind of seemed like everyone else like lost their mind. Like they got the reveal trailer, whenever that was, and then they were like, "We have to wait this long? It's been delayed? No!" But I don't know. I think games just need a while to develop in at least some cases because they take a lot of work. There's lots of people working on them. Maybe it takes longer than 3 years to develop a game. I remember all the fan art that spawned like immediately as soon as we saw what Breath of the Wild Link looked like. I think people initially thought it was going to be a darker game too because of the hood and the really dramatic way he like shoots the Guardian. That was a lot of that can't have been cheap to animate. But I remember as soon as Zelda's design got revealed, people lost their mind because she was like wearing pants. And I'm not sure if it was ironic or not, but I was like, guys, it's the 21st century. This should be more normalized. I don't know if I would want the next Zelda game to look the same. I don't know if I would want it to have the same art style. I think it could be fun to see more detail. Like, that's not how I personally draw, but it could just be fun to see what that would look like. I would almost want it to look like a drawing or a painting. Do you get what I mean? Where things like have clear outlines, but they're also shaded in a way where it looks like you painted it. I can't think of a reference right now, but kind of like if you made a drawing in pencil, you inked over it, but you colored it with markers. Even if things didn't have clear outlines, that could be fun. I like when things are able to have lots of details, but they're also very clearly like they're not overly detailed. They're stylized enough that the more fantastical elements don't look out of place. Like it's really cool to see hair flowing in the wind, for example. But I might not want like realism to be applied everywhere because you have like pores and individual hairs and stuff, but they're styled in like really anime looking ways or very stylized ways in general. That can end up kind of taking you out of it because you're like, wait, that wouldn't be possible in real life. It was fun to read about how nobody really planned for Breath of the Wild Link to wear blue. He just ended up kind of looking like that. I think sometimes fans underestimate how things just happen sometimes. Not everything has a plan behind it. Sometimes things just go in directions you don't expect. I wonder if that's where the idea to have Zelda wear blue came from too, because she's like the second most important character. Maybe that inspired the royal family generally wearing blue. Maybe in this like beach building Zelda game, you could start out wanting to leave your beach village. You want to explore the world. But if you come back to like help it survive and flourish, then you get more and more people on your side and they can help you explore more and more of the world. I think it's fun when stories will first start showing you like some crazy action. And just as you're like, what's happening? Where are we going? Who is that? It cuts back to the beginning of the game and you're like, oh, oh, we're gonna get to that eventually. Like in the start of Final Fantasy 15, where it starts out very action heavy, and then the story just cuts back to four dudes pushing a car, and you're like, oh, this is where we're starting. You could show like the monsters, the terrain, where the story will eventually end up, and then you loop back to just some dude in a like a beach villa snoozing. as he usually is. It's also the saying that water has memory because in real life we've always had the same water. It just gets recycled. It's the second hind leg. It's a little bit more curved. So maybe you could have a mechanic where you can like interact with the nature around you. And if you do, like, if you trigger the right mechanics or something, you can learn about what happened in those places in the past, head and body. You could see like illusions of it. Maybe you could tell a story about how like these things have happened in the past and now you must prevent them from happening again. Is that one of the tufts that shouldn't be in this color? Yo, who made this? Who made this live on stream? Well, this may look very strange at the moment. Like I'm a doll customizer, getting out all the pieces. It looks a little morbid, but this is how amigurumi looks before you put it together. Okay, well, I can always save this, if I cut it up, I'll basically have a bunch of really soft stuffing. I might need to make the other inner ear as well. Okay. We're gonna need two of these. And two of the lower ear tuft pieces. So that shouldn't take too long, just four little thingies. Maybe you could have monsters based on like whales or octopuses, sea creatures. Some of those in real life are definitely big enough to be like boss monsters. Like I'm pretty sure we've only found like dead colossal squids, but those things have a health bar. In real life, they live really deep down, so they're hard to study. But maybe you could have like a part of the game where you swim really far deep down into the ocean. You have to fight a giant magical squid. There are also some kinds of fish that can camouflage themselves really well. I think the stonefish is the one that camouflages really, really well and is super poisonous. So maybe you could have a boss that camouflages and poisons you. You know how coral reefs are like a living space for a lot of creatures in real life? Maybe you could have the Zora live in like castles made of coral. I don't know a ton about sea creatures, but maybe you could have like a a boss that's like really smaller that looks like a shrimp, but it punches really hard. You know, like the mantis shrimp. Or you could have a boss that looks really goopy but is really smart, like how octopus is, as we all know, very intelligent. They don't they don't have bones either, to my knowledge, which is how they can fit through really small spaces. So maybe you could have a boss that you have to like chase through tunnels underwater, where it can move around all its tentacles. It doesn't stay in one spot very much. Maybe instead of great fairies, you could have like great mermaids. Man, are those ladies supposed to be funny? Because they are not. Sorry if you can hear the assorted chaos in the background. Okay, now this we connect to the upper piece. Okay. I'm kind of curious about the reason Linkle got so popular. Not because there's anything like particularly wrong with her, just like why her? Why this cut character in particular? Okay, that should be 11. There are stories about dragons controlling water and the weather too. If you had a Zelda game that took place like on the water, maybe you could bring back the idea of dragons ruling different parts of it, like its Skyward Sword. Or how I don't think they rule parts of the world, but just how they're like really important dragons in Breath of the Wild. What was the reason behind like drawing Link in the first place? Like there's been Rule 63 fan art of Link forever. Right? That's one done. Whose idea was it to be like, let's just take Dynasty Warriors Lu Bu and make him a dragon? Like it worked. I'm just wondering how do you arrive at that? How do you get there? Who was like, let's take the humble Wizaro and make it into an important character? The humble Wizrobe, the enemy, who was looking at that and like, let's turn this into an important character. Yeah. Where did the ideas for all this come from? Man, do you guys remember the sheer amount of jokes that were made about the scarf, about how it would get in the way? A very blue motif. Like maybe blue has been an idea in the works for a while. It's a fantasy series, you shouldn't worry about it getting in the way. But people were like so like at least where I lived, people were like, "Oh my gosh, this is so dumb. Let's meme about it endlessly." And by the time the game actually came out, I was sick of it. Do people really think it like looked silly? I thought it looked cool, like it would like flutter behind him dramatically in the wind. The scarf. People are so weird. I really like the color scheme of Lana's outfit, the blue, purple, white, and gold with just a little bit of red for contrast. It's really pretty. Tie this off first. Okay, now this part again. It would be really fun to see Lana and Sia show up again, as the Guardians of Time. I'm not like, are you allowed to do that? Because Hyrule Warriors is like a collab with Dynasty Warriors. They don't know a lot about licensing. I wonder if that's possible. There are so many things in the ocean you could even use to create cool monster designs like seahorses or lionfish. A lot of them are really brightly colored to say like, "Don't eat me." But then you get farther down into the ocean and there's like anglerfish and things just start looking crazy. You could even have a monster with like a lure on its head, but if you follow it, like not the super obvious kind. I know there are monsters like that that already exist. I'm saying one that's actually convincing. But, you know, if you see a light in the ocean and you just follow it, then sometimes it turns out to be the monster. I know plenty of different kinds of fish have inspired the Zora in the past, but it could be fun to try out ones that haven't been done before. Like, I don't know every single Zora design in the series, but you could take the really colorful ones like clownfish, make them look really unique. All right, that's that one done. Now it's just time to make the other little triangle that we'll put inside of the ear. It's just a triangle, shouldn't be too difficult. There's so many different kinds of shells, and some of them come in like really vibrant colors. You could use those to inspire different kinds of monster. Like maybe there are crabs, or they're like shellfish, but they jet propulsion snap at you really quickly. It could be fun to like sail and maybe even do battle with monsters from the boat and stuff. But I wouldn't want it to be like the main focus of the game, you know, Wind Waker did that already. Maybe there are some sea monsters so big, you know, humans can only fight them from the boats. It would be nice to have a resistance that actually does stuff too, because I don't think, like, I could check again, but I don't think the resistance in Twilight Princess really plays into the story that much, even though they're the only people that we know of that are like banding together and trying to put a stop to the Twilight taking over the land. You could tie that back to having to take care of the beach village and how you have to like work with your community. I wonder what happened along the development pipeline where A Link Between Worlds ended up being its own game. Because as far as I can remember, it started out as a remake of A Link to the Past, which is why they have so much in common. But then it ended up kind of being its own game. I wonder if part of that was it was like the gap between Skyward Sword and whatever the next game was going to be. I don't know if they decided it was going to be called Breath of the Wild yet. So they were like, let's make it its own thing. I wonder what makes players enjoy the crafting mechanics so much. It's not something I'm personally really interested in, but a lot of people seem to like it. Getting to cook food or build items. You could like catch fish. There's usually a fishing mini game in Zelda games, but you could catch them and like actually eat them. Speaking of shellfish monsters, maybe if you catch those, you could eat them too. Or octopus, squid, seafood. Okay, that's that done. I don't think we're going to start assembling this today because there is so much to do, but we do need to put some stuffing in these. So that's probably what we're going to do next. Hopefully that should be good. It looks like a little boot. Maybe if you collected different kinds of shell, you could make those into armor. In real life, shells aren't always that strong, but they could be like magically enhanced. Or you could collect like the beak of an octopus monster and use that for something like a weapon that goes pinch pinch. Or a real octopus has three hearts, so maybe you could get like three three monster heart drops from it, and you can like eat them or use them to craft or something. Or there are crab shells too. There's lobster shells. Those have pincers too. There's there's the crabs with the one big claw and the one little claw. You could collect the big claw, use that to make a weapon. Have you ever heard of the Antarctic sea spider? It's not really a spider, it just looks like one, but it's a creature where some of its brain ends up in its legs. Like the brain, only so much of it can fit in the like torso area, quote unquote, because it's small. The whole creature is very small. So some of its brain power ends up being in its limbs, kind of like an octopus. Maybe you could use that to make a monster. Maybe if you go to like different parts of the coast, the beaches could be different. Like how if you go to volcanic beaches, they look really different. If you go to a lot of northern beaches, some of those are just like icy. Or even if they're not that far up north, some of them are very rocky. They have lots of forests. They're not like tropical warm sand. They have different animals too. That should be done. Okay. Now we have all the pieces. So next we'll probably start putting some wire in here so we can pose it. Maybe putting on the face and then start attaching it all together.